Hello and welcome to our 12th and final assignment in our course Competition Policy and Strategy. In this video we are going through the solutions to exercise 12.1. The topic of this exercise is third-degree price discrimination. And in order to understand third-degree price discrimination, we are asked to consider the following model situation. In this model situation, we assume that there is one firm which produces a good at constant marginal costs, and for the sake of simplicity, let's just set these constant marginal costs to be equal to 0 in this particular case. We furthermore assume that this firm sells this good to customers in country A and customers in country B. So we treat these two countries as two completely separated markets. One market in country A, another market in country B. In both markets, the firm is the monopolist. And then we, in addition, know the demand functions for both of these markets respectively. The first demand function, QA with Q with an index A, reads A minus PA. And the demand function for the second market, market B, reads Q with an index B equals B minus PB. Alright, so we don't know exactly what the demand functions look like, but we do know they are linear in price and they have a a constant. The change in price is constant, so the slope is equal to 1, all right? And all we know is, well, there is some parameter A that defines how far upwards this demand function is shifted. And the same, of course, holds for market B, where parameter B defines how far upwards or downwards this whole linear demand function is shifted. With regards to parameters A and B, we know that A is bigger than B, right? So the demand function for market A is shifted upwards or to the right when comparing to market B. And we furthermore know that A is less than 3 times B. So A is bigger than B, but less than 3 times bigger than B. So what we know is that this situation looks somewhat like this, where A is somewhere up here, and then there is B somewhere below, and these two demand functions, of course, are parallel, and they are just shifted upwards in the case of country A. All right, so enough about this. In the first step, we are asked to assume now that there are no fixed costs in production and there is no transporting of the good, right? So we completely abstract from any sort of costs for this firm. We only want to consider the demand functions of these two markets, just for simplicity of the model. Now in task A, we are asked to consider a situation where the monopolist can price discriminate. That of course means the monopolist can choose a price A for market A and a price B for market B, and these two prices do not have to be the same. They can be different, one price for each market respectively. We are now asked to find out what prices the monopolist will set in country A and in country B. What are the production quantities, profits, and consumer surpluses in each of these markets respectively? So what we are faced with for now is a very simple situation where we have two markets, and on each of them there is a monopolist maximizing their profits, right? And we know how to do this from previous exercises, from the very first assignments on. We already know how to do this, only difference being, of course, that we are now considering two markets in parallel, so to speak. But because the monopolist is allowed to discriminate in prices, we essentially have two profit maximization problems, one for each market. So With price discrimination, what we are simply facing is a profit maximization problem of the monopolist, as I alluded to earlier. So what we are doing is we state the profit function. There, of course, is one profit function for each market. So pi with an index A reads price A multiplied with the quantity sold on market A. And of course, we know from the demand functions that QA equals A minus PA. So we simply substituted this because there is no cost in production. We don't have to consider cost in production in this profit function. And with that, we have this very simple profit function for market A. And of course, the exact same logic applies when we state the profit function for market B. Based on this profit function, we then maximize profits with respect to the strategic parameter of the monopolist. And of course, it's up to you to decide whether you want to maximize over the quantity or the price. It's equivalent in this monopolistic scenario. We, as you can see, decided to maximize over the price in the market. And if you do so, of course, stating the first order condition for the maximum, yada, 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 you will find out that the profit maximizing price equals A over divided by 2, so 1/2 A, and that the profit maximizing quantity is the exact same, A divided by 2. Now, now we have the profit maximizing price and quantity for market A, and of course, if we want to find out profit maximizing price and quantity for market B, we're doing the exact same strategy. Only difference being that, of course, we now consider the demand function for market B as stated in the exercise. So we do the exact same for market B, and if we do so, we get, of course, very similar results, only difference being that now parameter A is interchanged for parameter B, so the price, the profit maximizing price in market B would be PB equal to 1/2 B, and the profit maximizing quantity in market B, QB, equals B divided by 2. All right, so now we have prices and quantities in equilibrium. Of course, we were in addition asked to find profits and consumer surplus. So that's what we are going to do next. All right, so with the equilibrium price and quantities in each of these respective markets, of course, we can calculate profits of the monopolist simply by plugging in these equilibrium results into the profit function, which we already stated and discussed on the previous slide. So calculating profits is as easy as that, simply plugging in the equilibrium results we just calculated for price and quantity. If we do so, we can then simplify the expression and state that the overall profits of this monopolist, when adding profits from market A and profits from market B, of course, is A squared divided by 4 plus B squared divided by 4. Similarly, knowing the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity, we can, of course, calculate consumer surplus, because this is once again a linear demand function. Of course, consumer surplus simply results as this triangle below the maximum willingness to pay of the consumers and the market equilibrium price, right? So we can plug in equilibrium price, equilibrium quantity for each of these markets respectively and find out that the consumer surplus in market A is A squared divided by 8, and the consumer surplus in market B turns out to be B squared divided by 8. So that is the market results in case the monopolist is allowed to discriminate in prices and therefore maximize their profits on each of these markets separately, setting, of course, two different prices, PA and PB. Moving forward, we are now considering what happens if the monopolist is no longer allowed to discriminate in prices. So what this means is that the monopolist must set the same price P in both countries or in both markets. Again, now for this adjusted situation, we are asked to find the market equilibrium, that is, find the price the firm will set, find the quantities that result in both markets, find profits, find consumer surplus in this case. Alright, so in this case, of course, because the monopolist can no longer maximize profits on both markets separated, so maximize profits in country A and then maximize profits in country B. We have a different profit maximization problem now. So the monopolist now by law and by assumption in this model has to set the same price in both countries. So what the monopolist is doing is they are considering the combined demand in both markets and maximize their profits based on this combined demand function. So, without profit maximization, what we're doing is we are once again considering the total profits of the monopolist. But in this case, of course, we cannot separate profit maximization problems, but instead there is one single profit maximization problem, namely the maximization over choice of price of the sum of the profit functions in market A and market B. Where, if we simply were to plug in the profit function we stated earlier, we of course have to consider that in this case both prices PB and PA have to be the same price. So we can simply interchange these parameters with one that has no index and is simply called P. So if we now state this profit function, so we add up the profits in country A and in country B and maximize this profit function over through the choice of the price, of the market price. So by, again, as we are already used to now, by stating the first order condition of this maximum and then solving this equation, we will find out that the profit maximizing price in this situation, so where there's only one price that then that is set for both countries at the same time, in this scenario the profit maximizing price turns out to be A plus B all divided by 4. With this price in equilibrium, in profit maximum, of course, we can calculate the quantities in each market simply by plugging in this equilibrium price into the respective demand functions. And if we do so, we can calculate that the demand in country A is 3A minus B all divided by 4, and the demand in country B is 3B minus A all divided by 4. Of course, the symmetry is no coincidence, but instead you will remember that the demand functions were the exact same, just with interchanged parameters. So, of course, logically, for the same equilibrium price, we will get symmetric quantities just with interchanged parameters, right? So, this is the equilibrium quantities for this given uniform price in both countries. Alright, now knowing price and quantity in both markets, we can of course calculate the consumer surplus in this world where the monopolist is no longer allowed to discriminate in prices, right? Now, of course, we have to consider the exact same calculation that we previously had, the only difference being that this time in both markets we have the same equilibrium price, rather than, in comparison to the previous situation with price discrimination, one equilibrium price for each market. Alright, other than that, everything stays the same, so we can calculate consumer surplus based on this equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantities in the respective markets, and we'll find out that, consumer surplus turns out to be these expressions down here on the slide. Alright, so we now have understood that, well, moving from the benchmark situation with price discrimination, where the monopolist was allowed to maximize profits in each country respectively and in isolation, so to speak, Now moving to this situation in B where price discrimination was no longer allowed, the monopolist had to set one uniform price, and we found this uniform profit maximizing price by stating the combined profit function in both markets or all markets of the monopolist, and then maximizing these profits by choosing price once again, only that in this case, of course, there's only one single price parameter. All right, so let's move then to the evaluation of these results. Let's move then to the comparison of these results. So evaluate the intervention from the point of view of the consumers in country A and country B. So as a starting point, let's reiterate or remind ourselves of the consumer surplus with price discrimination. And what we saw was, this is of course just the results from the previous slides when we were discussing task number A. We saw these two expressions for consumer surplus for markets A and B respectively. All right, and now this we want to compare with the consumer surplus under this new law regime where the monopolist is by assumption no longer allowed to discriminate in prices. So we are now comparing for each country respectively the old consumer surplus from task A, so with price discrimination, to the new consumer surplus from task B without price discrimination. On the left-hand side we have the result from task A. On the right-hand side we have the result from task B. These two expressions now need to be compared in order to evaluate from the point of view of the consumers whether or not they are better or worse off moving from price discrimination to non-price discrimination. All right, and what we will see, or what we can see from this expression, is that for any situation where A is bigger than B, the consumer surplus in country A has increased. This might not be obvious simply by looking at this inequality, and I would suggest that you rearrange this expression until you find a simplified version where A is on one hand side, B is on the other hand side, and then you will see that this expression down here holds, so that consumer surplus is bigger without price discrimination as long as A is bigger than B. Right, so, and of course the same method can be applied when evaluating the intervention from the point of view of consumers in country B. So again, we are comparing consumer surplus of consumers in country B in a situation with price discrimination, so from task A, to a situation without price discrimination, so from task B. And what we want to find out is under what conditions is consumer surplus smaller with price discrimination than it is without price discrimination. And again, what we will find out by rearranging this expression is that this statement is true, so consumer surplus did actually become bigger when abolishing price discrimination, as long as this statement down here is true. So as long as A is bigger than B, we see that consumer surplus in country B decreased, right? And again, we simply start by stating this inequality and then rearrange the expression until we can read, for example, by getting A on one hand side of the inequality and B on the other hand side of the inequality, until we can read that, until we arrive at some expression that we can evaluate based on our knowledge that by assumption A is bigger than B. right? And as long as A is bigger than B, we know that if for this particular inequality, the consumer surplus in country B decreased when moving towards a world where price discrimination is no longer allowed. So moving from A to B. All right. So, interpretation of this result. The country with the higher willingness to pay, so in this case, country A, will face a lower price once price discrimination is abolished. All right. So, so that's the first thing we know. The second point is country B has a lower willingness to pay because we know by assumption B was smaller than A. Prices will increase going from a situation with price discrimination to a situation without price discrimination. So when comparing these two market scenarios, one with price discrimination and one without price discrimination, and there's the same demand function because we are now considering market B, so each time the maximum willingness to pay is exactly B. What we will see is that with price discrimination, price increase going from price discrimination to without price discrimination. So with price discrimination we have some lower prices, and without price, when there is no price discrimination, we will have a larger price increase going from situation with price discrimination to a situation without price discrimination. All right, so because this is in the way, let me just quickly erase this. Then finally, we know that price decrease in country A in this situation from this first point, of course. So what this implies is if the price decrease in country A, consumer surplus will increase in country A. And then arrive from the second point, of course, prices increase in country B, moving from task A to task B, and this implies increasing prices imply that consumer surplus will decrease in country B. And thus we have an evaluation for both countries of this abolishment of price discrimination. All right, so under task C, we are now asked to show that in the case of this prohibition of price discrimination, market B is not served if the willingness to pay of the consumer in country B is sufficiently small compared to that in country A. All right, so now we are asked to find the condition under which an abolishment of price discrimination will result in a price, a uniform price, that is actually larger than the maximum willingness to pay of consumers in the small country, in country B in our particular case. All right. So, our approach is to compare profits in country A with the total profits without price discrimination. So, the monopolist profits in country A, we already found this out. So when the monopolist is maximizing profits in countries separately, considering one market at a time, we found out that the monopolist profits in country A would be A squared divided by 4. In addition, we know from task B that profits in both countries, so when serving both countries, is A plus B squared divided by 8. From this comparison, or starting from these profit functions we arrived earlier, we can now compare the profits in country A with the total profits without price discrimination. So what we are looking for, according to the description of the task, is a situation where the profits of serving country A only and in isolation, so pi A, is bigger than serving the both countries in combination, so pi with an index A plus B. Under which conditions is pi A larger than pi A plus B, where again pi A stands for the profits of the monopolist when they only serve country A, and pi with an index A plus B stands for a situation, or the profits in a situation where the monopolist serves both markets at the same price. Same price at the same time. So, we want to find parameters or conditions for the model parameters A and B so that this inequality holds, all right? So what we can do is we plug in the calculated profits pi A and pi with an index A plus B from the previous that we stated on the previous slide. So we plug in these two expressions into the inequality we just stated. And then we analyze by solving for A, by bringing A on one side of the inequality and B on the other side of the inequality. We find the conditions, the interval of values that A and B have to take in order for this inequality to be satisfied. And if we do so, we find out that this inequality is satisfied for any A that is larger than B times, and then all in brackets, the square root of 2 plus 1. Again, this is simply by substituting the expressions for these profit functions and then rearranging the inequality until we have solved it for parameter A. Doing this yields the condition A has to satisfy in order for this condition up here to be valid. So, if the willingness to pay is sufficiently large enough in country A, namely if the maximum willingness to pay A is bigger than this expression on the right hand side of the inequality, so if this holds, then it's profits maximizing to only serve A. If this inequality down here is satisfied, then this inequality up here is satisfied, which implies that in this scenario it is profit maximizing for the monopolist to only serve market A and not both market in combination. Alright, now to the fourth and final task of this exercise, we are now asked to assume specific values for A and B. We are going to assume that A takes value 40, B takes a value of 10, and furthermore, we assume that the monopolist is facing fixed costs in production of 420. Now we are asked, based on these numbers, to show that the company can profitably serve both markets if price discrimination is allowed. We are first asked to show that in a scenario where the monopolist is allowed to discriminate in prices, they can actually serve, or it's actually profit maximizing to serve both markets. And then in the subsequent step, we are of course asked, well, what happens if we don't allow for price discrimination? What is the new market outcome? All right, so let's start with the first task and consider a situation where the monopolist is allowed to discriminate in prices. We have, of course, in task A already found market equilibrium prices and quantities as well as profits in this situation. We simply have to plug in parameters A and B that we have now assumed values for. So the equilibrium price in this scenario in market A would be 20, the quantity would be 20 as well. In market B, price and quantity both would be equal to 5. That implies that the combined profits of the monopolist in this scenario turn out to be 425. Now, if the monopolist faces 420 units of currency as fixed costs, well then it is still profitable to engage in both markets and sell their product, right? Because there's still a positive profit in the end of at the end of the day. So even considering these fixed costs, we still see a positive profit in the order of magnitude of 5. So that's the first part of this question. Show that the company can profitably serve both markets if price discrimination is allowed. Well, that's done. Second part of the question, what will be the market outcome when price discrimination is prohibited? So let's consider a world without price discrimination and analyze the market outcome. So we know, of course, again, the profit maximizing price in this scenario from task B. We only have to plug in these specific numbers we now know and have assumed for the parameters A and B. So we know that the market equilibrium price, or the profit maximizing price in this scenario, would be 12.5, which of course is larger than the prohibitive price in market B. The maximum willingness to pay in market B is only 10 by assumption. So this of course means, just consider the market scenario, you have some parameter B, and the equilibrium price now is somewhere up here, right? Which implies this market B is not even being served at all. So in this case, for price discrimination, when the profit maximizing price in both markets combined would be 12.5, we see that the monopolist only serves market A actually. And in market A, they are now making, if they are only serving market A, of course, it is profit maximizing to set the monopolist price in market A. So, because the profit maximizing price when considering both markets at the same time is larger than the maximum willingness to pay in the smaller country, well, the monopolist realizes that they will not serve the smaller country, and instead they choose the profit maximizing price in the larger country, country A. So again, we know the result from task A. The result from the profit maximization problem in market A in isolation would be a price of 20, a quantity of 20, and therefore overall profits of 400. Considering the fixed costs, however, that are 420, we will now come to the realization that the profits of this engagement would be a negative 20. So it's actually not profitable for the monopolist to enter the market in this scenario where they are not allowed to discriminate in prices.